Welcome back, everybody, to the Precedent Minds of the Mavericks. My name is Amina, and this week we're back for part 2 with SAFWAN. Last week he was absolutely incredible. He just was so honest in everything he was saying, and this week is no different. This week we talk about all the accolades he's accumulated, from having a gold record to being Juno nominated, getting on Big Shiny Tunes 2, also his work as a lawyer, how he's developed himself there. He is now an established lawyer who's also a partner at Taylor Obala Murray Leyland, which is an entertainment law firm based in Toronto. And we really just dive into things like ego and self-awareness that's really set him apart, in my opinion. So without further ado, let's get into this episode with Saf. This week we're back with Saf, and I'm really excited because we used to work together, and I feel like in the workplace you are always really open and super cool about like answering questions, but I feel like there has to be some professionalism or some like secretive stuff. So now that we don't work together, I feel like I can ask you a lot more, and I'm really excited about that. Not that I would be doing anything wild, but I want to start off with we left off last week where you're now a lawyer. But going back to the band, I think it's really important because we see a lot of times that like bands break up just because there's like a lack of respect or what have you. And with you, Earl and Sean, I just feel like there was such great chemistry. Like watching interviews with you guys, like just the way you guys would listen to each other when the other was speaking or whatever it was, you complimented each other very well. And I think it came across in the music as well. How were you guys, like, were you guys mindful of that, or is it just like it was off the bat chemistry? Like, did you guys work on that stuff?
I think it probably starts with musically what's happening. What's your interaction in the musical space? At least that maybe in an ideal scenario, that's what it should be about, right? And I think for us, that was the case. We were certainly in the early years, like everything was focused on growth and sharing as musicians, right? And honing that skill set. And at the end of the day, you know, not to oversimplify, but trying to make music that we all liked and would hope that other people would like too. So I think when that stuff starts to mesh, and there's good overlap in terms of the types of music we like, we pretty much throughout our careers, we would always be trying to bring new music to the other band members. And it almost turned into like a competition of like, you know, what, and that was the CD era too. So it's like, what new CDs are you bringing on the road to like expose to the other dudes that they might not have heard of? And so, yeah, I think that was like a really healthy starting off point, like where it's almost like this pure thirst for both musical consumption and musical creation, and getting better at both of those two things, being like good curators and good creators, and we pushed each other in that respect, and not consciously. I think it just was like we were probably a little bit internally competitive, like brothers tend, and siblings, sisters and siblings tend to be. So I think that was a big part of it. But yeah, that probably bled into how do we interact. Certainly in the public facing kind of sphere, and interviews are weird, right? Like interviews are. That you're usually limited for time. And when you're that young and kind of haven't had that experience before, it's like just an odd, even when you're not that young, hell, it's just an odd thing, right? Someone's asking you questions, and asking you to talk about yourself or something that you've made. So you have to like, you have to be somewhat self-aware, and give each other and give people space to speak within that. I think that happens even if you're not an interview, just hanging out with people in a room. It's like if there's one person who's just talking nonstop, or at every chance they get, more often than not, like after a while, it's like, I think I'm gonna switch rooms here, because it's just like, it can't be about that. So yeah, I think it's about giving each other space and giving each other room to breathe and express yourself, which again applies in the musical sphere. It also applied in the like the physical sphere of like, we're going to be on tour for however many days a year in a bus. You got to learn to give each other space.
Yeah. And I want to go on that because obviously you're in this rock star life, egos might start to build. How did you like essentially learn to control yours? Because I feel like you've never been for as long as I know, you've never been egotistical at all.
Oh, that's a lovely thing to say. Thank you. I take that as the highest compliment, because for that's a big pet peeve of mine is egos that are out of control. Like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, everyone has an ego, whether you're talking about like, just the base sense of self or additional layers of self-importance.
And I
But
wanted
I
to, that's
think,
why I asked you to do this interview, because I always really, really, really appreciated talking to you, because I felt like I learned so much, and it was never this condescending, well, I know this, and I'm going to talk at you about it. It was like, let's converse about it. And like,
no, I'm so glad to hear that.
Sick.
Yeah, that makes me really happy. Thank you. I'm glad that's how you felt, and that's what I kind of was putting out there. But yeah, it's, in a band, it's crazy because you are, if things are going well enough, you're going to have a lot of people telling you how great you are.
Absolutely.
You'll also hear people telling you how shitty you are.
Of course.
But the ego tends to run with the how good you are part more, right? Because it confirms your wildest hopes. So yeah, it's hard. I'm not gonna, like, I struggled with it. I know the other guys probably, whether they were aware of it or not, the ego starts to get inflated. One thing that really helped was that Sean and I in particular, we grew up together, right? The first dude I ever played music with was him, and it was in, I think, grade 4. So, and then we were in, like, constantly through all of elementary school and high school, we were in the same class, we were friends, we hung out. So we saw each other and like have pictures of each other with like terrible haircuts and terrible fashion choices and all that stuff. So we saw each other.
I think should make a comeback. I'm not gonna lie. The long hair was so fucking sick. Looks upon.
Well, that's not even the worst of it, man. It was like there's like a grade 7 or 8 picture that Sean has.
Wow.
I have like it's like the most colorful outfit I think I've ever worn in my life. It just seemed normal back in those days, but it's kind of like it's like the old TV show In Living Color meets like early Fresh Prince of Bel-Air kind of vibes. Okay. And then like my hair's kind of, I mean, my hair is bone straight, so it doesn't grow in an afro, but it's like it's really puffy and bouffant kind of. And then and I'm like, yeah, it felt like maybe I was like a lost member of the Jackson 5 or something. It was sick. But anyway, point being, it's tough to let your ego get too inflated when you got that other person there that can be like, hey man, I saw you in your like hippie phase, dude. You're not, all of this is just a show, bro. Yeah. And especially if you have the tendency, which we tended to have, of like making fun of each other, right? We poked a lot of fun and played a lot of jokes on each other and made fun of each other a lot. We ripped each other a lot. And I think that's, as long as it doesn't go too far and the person can take it, it can be a healthy thing to just kind of keep your ego in check.
You always need friends who can roast you, and you need to be able to roast yourself, is what I always
say. And just put it out there, like, that's who I'm happy to be that guy for anyone on earth.
Yeah.
Like, I'm happy to roast you. Just tell me stuff about you. I'll roast.
And I think that's really interesting because it's a sign of respect, right? Like, I think, like I said, mentioned before, like, I feel like you guys really had respect. And there was times, where you were like, yo, I'm going to go home while we're on the road, for example. And like, were your bandmates supportive of that? Like, it just seemed like they were cool with what you wanted to do as long as it didn't hinder the band, which I think is really important. Because I think when you're in a dynamic like that, like, you can just get very individualistic, where you're like, this is what I need for myself, and not recognize what other people need. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, I think I'd be like, it'd be false to say that was the case all the time. There were instances where certainly things any individual band member were doing that didn't kind of fit within what the other band members felt like were the best decisions for the band or for themselves. There'd be friction for sure.
Yeah.
I think, you ultimately end up, and look, I mean, full disclosure, that's where we ended up, right? Like, there's 2 of us left.
Yeah.
So
fair.
You figure out, I think you try to, as you grow up, you try to figure out how to navigate relationships and other people's actions and choices in a way that you can feel good about yourself in. And at the end of the day, that's all you really got control over anyway. So
absolutely.
Yeah. You try to respect people around you and treat them the way you want to be treated, the golden rules.
Yeah. And then like talk to us about creating your sound, because like we've gone on that, like you were saying that like you guys would like show each other new music, and clearly like there was influences there.
Mhm.
And it was a bit of competition, but also like it was just like vibing, like you guys were just vibing. And I feel like that sounds very apparent in your music. Um,
Yeah, whether that's good or bad, it's tough to say, because the good part of it is, again, it's such a pure thought and sentiment, right? Of like, we just want to be better musicians, and to do that, we're going to listen to as much music as is humanly possible, and
yeah.
invariably you'll start to emulate bits and pieces of whatever stuck with you in that music. Some subtly, in some instances very subtly, in some instances very obviously. So the first wave for us was definitely blues,
Yeah.
um, and that played a huge role in kind of the beginning iterations of who and what we were, and that quickly led to like soul, old R&B, which then eventually led to funk, and also
Yeah.
led us to like the other bands. There's a couple of arms that happened. There was that soul R&B arm that happened, another arm that was like the other people that emulated blues, American blues. So whether that was like the Led Zeppelins of the world, um, or like Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, or stuff like that, right? Where you're like, oh, this is the kind of different, or Stevie Ray Vaughan. This is like the other. This is a newer take on that, or
Yeah.
newish take on it. So that started influencing us quite a bit, and as did the soul R&B stuff, which eventually led us to funk. Our third record was like pretty much dedicated to kind of paying respects to the world of funk. Um, so yeah, you're listening to all that stuff, and it's a pretty invigorating environment to be in.
Yeah.
You're so focused on this thing, and so engulfed in it, and everything in your life is about music. It can also be kind of like draining, because that's it, like everything is about that, and it's like healthy lives are ones that have variety in them. So I guess our variety was just listen to as many different types of music. So the positive in that was, again, like I said, we'd have like a record that was really dedicated to funk, and another that was kind of like blues rock, and
Yeah.
another that was kind of like more singer songwritery, and like you could tell we've been listening to like Peter Gabriel and the Beatles a lot, et cetera, et cetera. So that's good for us and our growth, and for, I think, musical expression, and the variety that is human experience, but not great for like how bands, especially back in the day, were marketed, which is you kind of do one thing and you stick with it,
Yeah.
and it's like lather, rinse, repeat, because that's what the people want.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess in a way that probably hurt us, right? It hurt us in terms of trying to fit us neatly into a category.
Yeah.
But at this point in my life, I kind of look back at that and I'm sort of proud of it. So
I think
whatever.
that's, yeah, I think that's like really progressive, because I think I think what you're saying, like, it's interesting now because I feel like music just blends so many things together. Like, you don't have to be in one category anymore. And like, my thing is always like, a good producer, for example, listens to everything. Like,
Mm.
a good example is OVO 40. He lists, like, his music catalog is insane. Like, I've heard him speak about what he listens to and his inspiration. And it's just like, yeah, to like up and coming producers, you can't just listen to a Drake type beat and then just be like, oh, I'm gonna make a Drake type beat. Like, OVO 40 is listening to everything under the sun, and like, even if it's just sound bites. So I think that's really interesting that you say that. And as much as you're saying that like you were put into it, like they wanted you into a category, like you guys have like amassed so many accolades over the time of your band, right? Like, you were gold in Canada, which is super, super sick. You guys were like the first North American band to tour in China, which I think is wild. And I want to talk about that because I feel like even now people don't recognize how big the Asian market is.
Mm.
How did that like come about? And like, how did you get yourself in the space, and how did you navigate that space?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. It just sort of happened. Our manager, so there were promoters in China back in those days that would like look around for, and it was early days of the internet, right? So people could kind of
Cool.
like all of a sudden reach out to people across the world with relative ease. So they some promoter reached out to our manager, and I think our manager was managing some like a piano player guy or something like that, and that's what they were reaching out about. But then
Oh
the manager
wow.
them about us, and they're like, oh, there isn't really like rock bands have never really toured China. It's not really a thing, but it could be. And this is like these are the early days of China's opening its doors from being a relatively closed society in some respects to not. So yeah, we were like, wow, that's a pretty cool. The promoter kind of heard us, like, let me get back to you. And he came back and said, look, we can do this, and this many dates and during this time, what do you think? And we were into it. We were like, what a cool and unique experience that is. So we went, and it was wild. It was so unlike any other touring experience I've ever had.
Wow.
And not just from the fact that you're in China, but also just like how everything was done, right? Like you'd go in and at that point, the kind of musical equipment was not very good. So you'd show up and be like, oh, I don't like these drums. I guess I could make something happen out of it. Or like there'd be an amp and you'd be like, I don't know if this amp is gonna like, this doesn't really, I don't even know if it works. And if it did, it's like, there's something wrong with this.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, their lighting shows were like unbelievable. Like we were getting like Rolling Stones level lights at these concerts we were doing. And meanwhile, like the drum set was like a broken down, dingy old kit and the amp didn't work. So it's like, it hadn't fully, all the infrastructure and the resources hadn't fully developed yet. So that made it really interesting at times. And then add in that you're like, we're sitting on a train for 14 hours from one city to the next, and it's like, you could reach over and touch another guy on a bunk, not the other guy in your band, but just some other random dude on the bunk next to you. And like the bathroom on the train is like literally a hole in the bottom in the floor, so you're like, you can see the tracks going by underneath, and like there's no seat, right? So it's like a lot of people had missed, and so that wasn't a lovely thing to look at or be around. So my body just was like, okay, shut yourself down. It was cool, but it wasn't that cool. Or like going to these cities where the market is crazy, like the population is crazy, right? You're going to these secondary and sometimes tertiary markets, and it's like, and our translator's telling us like, oh yeah, this is a smaller city. There's only 3 million people here.
Oh my God.
Like, oh, okay, like that's crazy. That's like right?
The size of Toronto now.
Yeah, it's like, or I remember we played this TV broadcast, and we were like, so what is this? And they're like, oh, this is such and such network. It broadcasts to this part of the country. It wasn't even the whole country. Holy shit. And so we're like, okay, cool. And our manager like, well, what's the viewership for this like? And like, it's probably in the 75 million range.
Oh my God. What?
Only 75 million?
Holy shit.
So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a pretty unique experience, and life-changing in many ways.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I genuinely do feel like the Asian market is so down. Like dance hall culture is massive in like Japan, for example. There's like been some like small Trinidadian acts also in Trini, so it's like I'm seeing like some of my like people like there, and I'm like, what? And like the turnout's wild. It's just like crazy over there. I just think it's so cool that you guys are able to do that. Did you find that like it helped? Like, were you part of the marketing at all when you guys were in Asia, or like you had a team to do that?
We were with Warner at the time, and Warner had they had a Warner China office, and so
that's crazy.
They did a little bit of stuff, but like those were CD days, right? And CDs don't sell in China unless they're black market CDs, at least back then. So there was you don't make any money, right? You can't.
Fair. So it's all of touring essentially.
It was just touring,
Yeah. And then speaking of CDs, like you guys were on Big Shiny Tunes too, which is fucking wild because like those CDs were everything. Like when Much Music came out with that like end of year package, it was insane, and it sold like Big Shiny Tunes sold like over 1 million copies. How did you guys get asked to be on that stuff? And I want to like more so it's like, how did you build to get recognized to be in these places?
Yeah, it was so. I had no clue at that time that it would be what it is, but it's pretty great what it is, right? It was a super cool mechanism to, and it kind of was indicative of what was going on with the Canadian music scene in general, where it kind of had its own legs for a minute there.
Yeah.
And it was like, you'd see like there were real budgets for videos and real budgets for making records, and like there was investment going on, right? Investment in building a musical scene, which is really cool. And Much Music was a huge part of that.
Yeah.
And Big Shiny Tunes was, along with the other compilation things, was a really
Just Dance.
Yeah, it was a really important piece of that. Where, so think about it, like we'd be on this CD with like, I can't remember who all was on it, but like big US acts, right? And so all of a sudden it's not just the typical sort of whoever was into like 90s CanCon at the time, but it starts spreading, you start spreading your reach to like this huge audience that you wouldn't probably otherwise be able to get to. And so, wow, what an amazing tool that is. So for us, it was really just a case of, we were with Warner. Every version of those, I don't know if people know this or not, but like the Canadian labels would agree to make this compilation. That meant they all had artists being on it, right? American artists that they had the rights to distribute in Canada. But then they'd also each kind of they each kind of get a slot for one of their domestics. And so that was Warner put us on, and we were like, yeah, awesome, cool. And yeah, it was awesome and cool.
Yeah, I love that. And also it's like, this is even like, I feel like this is like fucking surreal. Like for me to hear it, you toured with AC/DC, ZZ Top, the Rolling Stones, and the Guess Who. Like, my mind is blown right now. Like, what? How did that come in? And like, what was that like playing to a show of people like that big?
It was what you'd think. It was crazy. The first time is crazy, right? Then you kind of get used to it. So like the first time, I gotta think, when was the first time? Well, I don't know if I can remember the first time, but I can tell you this. The first show I think we did with the Rolling Stones was in the Skydome. What's now called something. Yeah, so that
Rogers Center.
Maybe sorry, the second one. First one was in the Montreal, whatever their forum is. The Bell, was it the Bell Center maybe?
Yes.
Okay, so that was pretty big, but that wasn't. But then you get to Skydome, and it's like, oh my God,
that's 50,000 people.
It's such a nutty environment to play music. It's not built for music, right? Like you shouldn't have concerts there. It's horrible. Like,
was the top open? Do you remember?
I can't. No, it's closed. It was closed, which in a way is worse, because now you just have like sound hitting off of every surface there is and coming back to you, right? It totally messes you up. Like you can't even tell what's going on in terms of like, if there's a moment where if you don't catch yourself, like you'll lose any sense of like what's the actual time going on here, what's the beat. So luckily we had in-ear monitors that helped, but still it was brutal. But yeah, that one was the one where it's like, oh, you can really feel it here. Like it's just, you look out and it's just this expanse, right, of this black open, like it's like you're in a black cave, a dark cave. But then you have these moments where you hear like the crowd, and it's like, oh my God, that's some powerful stuff. But there's an art to it, right? There's an art to like playing that kind of a show versus playing like a club show, or playing like a festival. And all those bands you mentioned are so good at it, right? Because that's what they've been doing their whole careers. So, like the reason why Mick Jagger moves in the way that he moves is because that's what works in that environment, right? That's how he gets eyes on him, and people dig that. And now it's different. Now it's like people just show up for that. But at the beginning, it was probably the way to get attention, right?
Yeah.
AC/DC, for example, is like their entire catalog and show is built for arenas. Like it's arena rock, right? Like it fits perfectly. And to be totally honest, like I wasn't an AC/DC fan going into that tour. And then like after a couple of shows, I was just like, oh my God, this is so perfectly suited to this environment. And they were just like nice guys, and like especially Brian really nice to us. And then I was like also here exposed to way more of the music too. But again, in that environment, I was like, oh, this makes complete sense. And then I became a big AC/DC fan. So there
That's
you go.
amazing. And like, so going on to like, you were just saying that like you kind of tailored how, like if it was a small venue versus a bigger venue, is it just like you guys choose whatever song makes more sense for what venue? Or is it like, are you doing
Yeah, it may not be
levels?
song. Yeah, it's a little bit choosing songs. That's not as big of a thing of it in my mind. That's more of like, well, in all those bands' cases, you know, it's like we know that there's some blues undertones, if not very
Yeah.
obvious bluesiness to all of those acts. So, you know, we play our songs that are the most bluesy, you know,
Yeah.
and that instead of ones that maybe aren't. But it's more like, how do you move on stage? I mean, I don't move. I'm a drummer, so I don't
Yeah.
get to move around that much in terms of walking. But you know, there's all of a sudden more thought put into like, oh, you need to like move. You need to walk around the stage. You need to like, it has to appear in a way that someone who's super far away can see something happening.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's no action for them, right? So
Yeah.
stuff like that you think about, or even like, what color are you going to wear on stage that you know it shows up. And even like banter, like how are you going to speak on stage when you're
Wow.
talking
Yeah.
inside them into the mic? It's probably not the best place for you to tell a long, you know,
Kanye style rant.
long monologue about, you know, how you wrote this verse and were inspired by the river you were looking at
Yeah.
in such and such place, and the weather was like this. And it's like, no, you want to keep it a little bit more succinct and think
Absolutely.
about revving people up, you know.
Yeah, that's fucking sick. And I do genuinely because I believe that because I've seen some artists that like at ACC who are openers and like the stage just eats them. And you can just tell they weren't like equipped for that size, but like then you see them a smaller venue and it's like, wow, this is like remarkable. So like it's like great that you thought about that. And I think it's something that artists should definitely need to think about. And I want to get into like life is a bit different now, but like Wide Mouth Mason put out an album in 2019. I Want to Go With You. And it was so crazy because I was your coworker at the time. I had no clue. And then you're like, yo, yeah, we put an album. And I was like, what? When the fuck did you even find time to write an album? Like, what is this? How is the process, like creative process change, or has it?
Yeah, well, now it's way more drawn out. So whereas in our earlier years we were putting out albums every, you know, 18 to 24 months, give or take, sometimes even in shorter gaps than that. Now our gaps are like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So the creative process is basically just stretched out a lot more.
Okay.
And you know, we'll send each other stuff. Sean lives in Vancouver, so
Wow.
we'll send each other stuff. Whenever we do gigs, there's usually like some kind of musical back and forth that happens, whether that's at sound check or even during the shows. Sometimes we have a lot of like, I don't know if we're a jam band, but I guess we're kind of a jam band in some ways. So certainly there's elements of that in there. And so sometimes songs and song ideas come out of those jam moments. And then sometimes it's just like, okay, well, let's like that. The last album was us having a series of you know 2 or 3 day chunks where we'd go and write and demo up songs at a friend's studio in Vancouver, on the back of like doing some shows, whether it was in BC or Alberta or Saskatchewan. We'd be like, okay, well, let's take a couple of days and hit the studio.
Yeah.
And so we did that over the course of like, I'm going to say a year and a half, maybe a bit more. And then gradually just like, that one was a much different thing in that much different process in that respect. It was like we'd taken all these little pieces over the course of a long period of time and then kind of stitched them together, and then finally went in for like 1 week of polishing everything and kind of putting it all together and making a finished product out of it. So yeah, we've done things in many different ways. Sometimes we record records kind of live off the floor. Sometimes it'll be a much more sort of produced thing where you're adding and removing and adjusting layers upon layers upon layers. Sometimes we have songs like already completed and ready to go. It's just a question of kind of fine tuning and then figuring out how we're going to dress them up for a record. Sometimes it's a question. Sometimes we just go in and say, well, let's just see what happens and make up songs on the fly.
Cool.
I think it speaks back to that same point we made earlier about keeping variety in how you do things. So not just keeping variety in what your output is, but keeping variety in the process of creating that output.
Yeah, that's so cool. And it's actually funny because you guys had a performance at, what tavern was it? It was
Dakota.
Yes. And I got the notification like within the week that it was 2 years ago. And I went to go see you. And I don't think I fangirled like that ever because I know you as a lawyer. You're my coworker. And then I saw you jamming. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? This is so cool. And it was so sick because you had like diehard fans that were there and you were there engaging with them. There was a woman that you actually introduced like our staff to, because you're like, yeah, like she's been rocking with us for years now. And to me, it's like the level of respect that people have for you is so wild. And even today, like when I would see clients come in to see you, they were just so excited to see you. And all the other lawyers are great too. But I just felt like the excitement I saw out of people coming to see you was wild. I was like, this is crazy. And it's funny because Carolyn, the office manager there, shout out to Carolyn, she's so fucking great. In August, Baka Not Nice posts on his Instagram that he's like, yo, I'm at my lawyer's office. Yo, tell me I made it. The plaque is on the wall. And it was so funny because like, he's a grown ass dude. And he just was like so excited just to see like the recognition you had. And like, talk to us about building those relationships because I feel like you're so good at it.
Oh man, thank you. That's really nice of you to say. I honestly like, this is gonna like take the legs out from under that, but I don't know. Like I just kind of like, it goes back to those first principles, right? If you treat people with respect and treat people with kindness and treat people how you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
And I think, you attach that onto like, it's odd because in many ways I'm quite cynical and jaded. But I do also get really excited about things from time to time.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and so do other people too, right? And I think excitement is so contagious and fun, right? It's such an interesting, unique, human emotion and shared experience if you let it be. So I don't know. We made music, and it's like there's people out there doing way more valuable things than that, right? There's people saving lives. There's people helping refugees stuck at borders. Like there's people doing really worthwhile stuff in the world. And we just made music to like satisfy our creative muse. And it's like, well, that's not really, I don't know if that should be that lauded or make us that important. But but at the same time, again, it's about that shared experience. If somehow something we made resonated with another human being in a deep and profound, or not even just in any way, but especially like a profound way for them, man, that like, what better thing could I experience than that, right? That's some deep emotional shared experience that again is so unique. And I just always really appreciated that. Like it thrilled me to know that someone else dug something I did. I mean, and I think that's true for all humans, right? If you like make a drawing, if you like drew something or made a meal, or I don't know, put together an outfit that someone else is like, yeah, I love this. I love what this thing is that you've created. Doesn't that feel great? Like, isn't that almost as good of a feeling as you can have, at least for a moment? It's just like, this is so uplifting. And yeah, I guess I always wanted to be the other people who were giving that to me. I wanted to give back to them again. So it's like this, here we made this thing. We'll give this to you. I hope you like it. And then they'd give us such good, positive vibes back from us giving that. And they were giving us something back. And I guess then I wanted to give something back again. And it turns into this feedback loop of like good vibes. And what's better than a good vibes feedback loop?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. And like now getting into the law side of it, like being like a lawyer, like I always would say, like, I would see people come into the office and like artists or what have you. And it's just like it seemed like they stepped in and they're like, yo, I'm that much closer to my dream. So when your lawyer gives you that excitement back, it's like, yeah, like I'm doing the right thing or I'm in the right place. Because obviously the entertainment industry is a really weird one and there's no blueprint. There's no almost safety. So it's like when you have your lower at least backing, it's like, yo, yeah, okay, sick, let's go. And you're just excited about what you do. And talk to us about building your clientele. I'm sure you had some ties from when you were in, like, because you're in the music industry, but like, how did you build that up?
Yeah, it was a big part of it, I think, of having had the experience as an artist, um, and having a bunch of highs and lows as an artist. I think
Yeah.
it lends it lends itself to you kind of being really understanding of what current artists are going through, or
Yeah.
new artists, or even experienced artists. And I think there's a comfort in that on both sides. Like,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable around artists because I am one too. And
Yeah.
I think it goes back the other way as well. And I think you're right about your point of, like, when you start having a team, like I have a manager and I have a lawyer and I have a publisher and I have a label, like all those pieces, and I have an agent, all those pieces are like legitimizing, right? They make you feel like you're legitimately doing this, and they validate, they validate what you're doing, and they
Yeah.
validate the choices you made. So that's a good feeling, and I'm again happy to be a part of any shared good feelings. So
Absolutely.
bring me into that in terms of, like, like I feel I'm always honored that someone wants me to be part of their team
Yeah.
in terms of their musical career. And when you are part of that team and that family, it's again this really unique journey that you're on with people. And I don't, like, what do I do to build that up? I just try to make sure that the people that I'm representing feel that from me, and
Yeah.
and and
Like
and,
how
and,
Baka
and
did. So excited.
yeah, right. Like I love that. I want them to feel like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm here for you, man. I'm here to, like, to fulfill a certain role for you, and I'm going to do it happily, and let's get it together.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And like you're a partner now, which I think is fucking sick. Um, and I don't know how you were back before I met you, but like I feel like you're not easily influenced and like by what's going on around you. Like you're a no bullshit kind of person. But you're not ever rude about things, and we've spoken about this before. That's why I appreciate talking to you. Was that intentional? Were you kind of just like, this is some stuff I've seen in the industry, so I'm just gonna like be this way? Like, I guess it's just like your core self. Like, how did you work on your core self essentially?
Just an easy question like that. No, I mean,
Because I think
I
you're a
don't.
standout. Like, I genuinely do, and I think that like sometimes like people might see it as like, oh, well, this person is difficult. I don't think you're difficult at all, but like you never know. If like you don't agree with somebody, people are like, oh well, excuse me. But like you were never like that. Like, and I think you're really respectful about it. And I think it's definitely, to me, it seems like it's aided in where you are now.
Thank you again. I'm really happy to hear that that's your take on it. I think so. You start off, this is like a heavy, deep, like nature nurture type question. So I think, your basic kind of values you get growing up from your parents or your siblings or your peer group or your broader community or whatever. And so my parents had some pretty strong kind of perspectives on things, and so that seeped into who I was early on. Um, but a huge, for all their flaws, one of their things that I'll praise them for is that they were always extremely generous and extremely compassionate. And
Wow.
so that was like, those two pieces were like core fundamentals of being in our family. And if you weren't those two, then you probably, yeah, that couldn't really happen, right?
Yeah.
That world didn't exist where you were like not those two things and in the family. So I think that was a jumping off point. And then the flip side of that coin is also like very opinionated, like
Yeah.
activists, social justice people. Like they did a lot to like fight against racism and fight for equality and fight against poverty and against um, you know war and violence and aggression, all that stuff. So those pieces were all there in me. And earlier in my adulthood, I was like quite outspoken and opinionated about stuff. And I think I had a harsher way of kind of putting it out there. Like I believe what I was saying was the truth, and that's it. There was no room for anyone else's truth. I think over the years, I have a very supportive and intelligent and wise, I think is the best way to put it, partner. And
I love her.
Yeah, she's kind of really helped me to see things in myself that are both good and that I can stand to improve if I want to. And so like self-reflection is a really difficult thing to do. And I think we often think we're doing it when we're not really doing it, or we do it but then forget about it. And so there's like the two stages of self-reflection and kind of critique and analysis, and then, well, what are you going to do about that? Like, can you affect change upon yourself? Especially the older you get, the harder it becomes, right? Because you're so entrenched in patterns. But yeah, I think that's a thing that's always been really important to me. We all, whatever you deem important, whether you're aware of it or not, that's what you're gonna put your time and effort and energy into. And so I think self-analysis and self-improvement, if I can put it that way, those were always like really important pieces for me in every facet of my life. Amazing. And so I think that probably helped me to, again, with my partner being who she is, that helped me to sort of see how I can improve on interacting with people, how I can improve on, sure, you have an agenda, you have certain things that you want to bolster and talk about and advocate for. Do it in an effective way, right? Don't do it in a way where you turn people off. Do it in a way where you actually are having conversations with people, where you are actually, saying what you're saying in a respectful and open way, and also be open to what the other person says back to you. Like none of us have a monopoly on the truth, and so bear that in mind when you're saying your things, whatever you're saying, with whatever conviction you're saying it with. Understand that the other person feels as strongly about what they're saying, and it could be the polar opposite of what you're saying. So be open to that and try to understand why. Why and where those thoughts come from. Wow. Both in you and the other person.
That was a great answer. Holy shit. Wow. I
don't even remember the question. I don't know where that came from anyway.
It's just about like understanding yourself and like how you work, because I feel like I was saying that you're no bullshit, you're not easily influenced, but like it wasn't, to me, it was never ever condescending. I wasn't like, oh my god, this guy's talking again, please stop. Never like that. So I think that's like a sick one.
I think it's fair to say that certainly there have been phases in my life where people would say that guy's a condescending prick. So I'm happy to hear that is not your take on it.
Some of it's also ego on people's end too, right? Because it's like sometimes if you're met with, I think you're super intelligent. If you're met with somebody who's intelligent and you feel intimidated, you might be like, oh, well, fuck this person. But like, yeah, like I don't know what you were like back then, but you're not that now, at least not to me. So from my experience,
maybe if you're just mellow on the other side, then I don't come across as much of a condescending. Maybe the condescending prick dial goes up when the person on the other side's like has some issues.
Yeah. And I want to talk about like that answer was great. And like I spoke about this in a previous episode with Blake Carter. She's the morning host of Flow 93.5, and we spoke about professional speaking. Did you ever get like media training? Because like even from like when you were young, when I was looking at those like old interviews, you were so well spoken.
Yeah, I never did. It's weird, right?
That's crazy.
I think maybe there was some like, okay, so when I was like 7 years old, I want to say, maybe this was like the beginning of it. My parents always like really encouraged me to speak and think and act. And so there was a peace rally in Saskatoon where I grew up, and it had to do with cruise missiles being tested. Americans were testing cruise missiles over Canadian soil, and so there are all these rallies across Canada to push back against that. And so there was one in Saskatoon, and somehow I guess my parents were really involved in that particular one. And they got me to go and like deliver a speech. They were like, you're going to write a speech and you're going to deliver it to this crowd. And so I was, like I said, I was like 6 or 7 years old, like pretty young dude, right? They helped me a little bit. And, they got me to write it, and then they helped me edit it and get it to a place. And then I delivered a speech to like 20,000 people. And it just didn't seem like a thing. I think that's what's nice when you're a little kid. Like you kind of don't even know until someone tells you that this is kind of an intimidating situation you're walking into. So yeah, I guess maybe the seeds were planted then. And then I suppose if you, I don't know where that comes from or if that actually exists. I'll tell you this, that almost every time I do an interview or do any kind of public speaking, I always walk out going, oh man, I could have done this, and this better. And I wish I hadn't said this, that, and the other.
Yeah. How do you combat that? Like, are you constructive towards yourself, or are you like self-deprecating?
Probably both. Maybe it starts as like a little bit of like beating yourself up, and then hopefully it quickly progresses into, okay, well, what can I learn from that?
Yeah, because I feel like you can't possibly think, oh my God, I was on some fucking shit there. Like, like this is so bad. Like, I think you gotta know, like when it's bad, like I feel like you would know if it was really bad, but like,
I don't know. It's hard to have perspective in that. That's why you need other people, right, that you trust and that can help you be like, you could have done this better. But this was really good.
Yeah. And like, was there like when you were on like the road, for example, like what would you do on your off time? Because it just seems like you have so much knowledge about so much stuff.
You want the for real answer?
Yeah. What the fuck? Yeah.
There were a lot of video games.
Oh,
there's a lot of listening to music. There was a fair bit of reading involved as well.
yeah.
And there may have been some other activities which are now legalized, which previously.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's super sick. Yeah. And I like ending every conversation off with, I think it's important to celebrate. So let us know a humble brag about yourself.
I cut my own hair.
Oh my God. Looks good. No one's going to see it on the podcast, but it looks good.
Well, write me a note. I'll send you a picture of me cutting my hair.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Saf, thank you so much. This interview was sick.
Thank you.
I hope you leave being like, yo, yeah, this turned out well. Like I'm not mad at anything I said.
I'm just happy. I like hanging with you, so I'm happy.
Oh my God. Sweet. Oh my gosh, Saf, thank you so much.